we want to welcome everyone. It's very, very nice to be together. And we're also wanting to welcome our online community because this is being streamed live. So there could be people all over the world watching tonight. So, you know, Diwali is one of the beautiful parts of it is that people go to visit their families. And that's what it feels like for Devi and me, is that we've come, perhaps traveled a little farther than many of you, visiting your families, but we've come here to visit our family. It feels very, very much like we have formed a family together, a spiritual family. And in fact, that family that forms on a spiritual basis is much deeper often than the blood relatives, because we aren't really the body, we're the soul. And that soul comes again and again into this world. And of course we have a birth family. We have a mother and a father and often siblings, brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles. We have sometimes a very large family. But in many cases, that family that we have in this world is a family that only comes together for 1 or 2 lifetimes. But that's not true of a spiritual family. A spiritual family comes together, and then we reincarnate, as Swamiji put it, and it's a tapestry that's woven with increasing complexity and increasing beauty over many, many, many lives. And so our spiritual family, those of us who are gathered, have been woven together before and will be woven again in the past. And that's why sometimes we meet somebody in our spiritual family and there's an immediate sense of closeness, an immediate sense of recognition. And Master said that when there's a deep friendship that comes very quickly, it's a sure sign that that friendship has developed in past lives. And so Devi and I feel very much that way. We've said before, but in many ways we feel much more Indian in our soul than we do American. That we had a certain mission. I think many of our recent incarnations have been in India. And we had a certain mission that we had to do, a certain purpose to our lives that brought us birth in the United States. Maybe it was so that we could grow up where Master and Swamiji were bringing their light to a new country and then get our training there so that we could come back to India and help bring that light. One time, the first time I came to India was in 1974, and it was a trip with Swamiji. And on the way, we flew first to Hawaii, and there we stopped at the ashram of a teacher whose name was Subramania. And he had a beautiful ashram on the island of Kauai. So we stopped there, and we visited for a day or 2 at his ashram. And then he said something very beautiful as we were parting. He said, "You have brought your light to this ashram," meaning Swamiji, and to a lesser extent, let's face it, the rest of us. Swamiji had a big lantern, and we had little candles. And so he said, "You have brought your light to this ashram, and we have added our light to your light." He said, "Now you're going to visit other places, spiritual places around the world. Wherever you go, bring your light. And if we do that, we will string the earth with strings of light and bind everyone together." It was a beautiful image of tying the earth together. Every race, every nation, every religion, doesn't matter. We're all children of God. And so tying that worldwide family together. You know, even though I've talked here about feeling the familiarity of this family and this particular spiritual family that we have, in fact, all people are our brothers and all people are our sisters. We only have one Father, and that's the Father above. We only have one Mother, and that's Divine Mother. And so we're all descended from the same parents. And one of the jobs that we have is to take away the darkness that sees separation, that sees this nation as opposed to that nation, this religion as opposed to that religion, this race as opposed to that race. And wherever there are divisions, those divisions create shadow. And our job is to be channels of light, to bring light into this world. Now, light is representative, of course, of an inner spiritual quality. Really, more than light, we're tasked with bringing love, acceptance, joy, those qualities that bind us together with each other. One of the beautiful parts, those of you who are watching online didn't have a chance to see this, but when we came here, it was beautifully decorated, and people were working on the decorations, and they were working on beautiful paintings that are on the pavement, Rangoli or Rangoli? Rangoli, and beautiful, bright colored coloring with beautiful flower patterns and so on. The whole ashram here, the whole center was decorated with flowers, as maybe you can see on the altar, beautiful flowers. And then, before we began the evening together, we all went out and lit a little candle. Dave? Yeah. Thank you. I need help.
It's called Deepak also.
Wow. No, that's too expensive. That's too advanced for me. Dia I can get. But beyond that, I won't venture. As it said, only fools tread on thin ice like that. So I won't be one of those fools tonight. At any rate, it was such a beautiful symbol of the work of Ananda, because from one light, and that light of course represents the light of God, then each of us lit a candle or a lamp, a diya, from that one source, and then we spread it around. And it's such a beautiful symbol of the way the divine works, and also the way that Ananda works. Swamiji was constantly going around the world. I mean, he traveled so much. Talk about frequent flyers. He was one of those frequent flyers who went again and again and again, bringing his light. But more than that, I don't think he thought so much in terms of light. Light emanated from him. But what he thought in terms was to bring love, to bring friendship, to bring acceptance, to bring those qualities that join people together. And each of us incarnates into this world with a certain, one might say, primary task that is ours to do in this life. And that task, to a certain extent, is for ourselves, because this world is a school, and we incarnate in order to learn the lesson that we need to learn in this lifetime. And so that which we come in to learn is something that God gives to us. But as part of that, the way anyone who's ever taught understands the truth, that the way we really learn something is to share it. And if we're supposed to come in to this lifetime in order to learn love, the only way we can do that is to share it with others. We can't learn love, which naturally wants to share itself, by keeping it to ourselves. We can't be a light for the world by covering it, as it says in the Bible, the Christian Bible. Don't cover your light with a bushel or a basket. If we have some light, we need to share that light. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to make any kind of a big deal out of it. We just need, Master said that the minutes are more important than the years. And so, minute by minute, it's more important to share light, to share love, to share joy, than it is to think, oh, the grand years, I will be such a big teacher or a big sharer or a big something or other. You know, when we think in terms of ourselves becoming big, Master used the image of a wave on the ocean. And normally we would think of a wave on the ocean. The bigger the wave, that at least I certainly thought this way, that someone like Master would be a huge wave that would tower above everyone else. But he corrected that. He said to Swamiji one time, Swamiji, Master was working, doing some writing, and Swamiji was just sitting quietly watching and feeling such love and such devotion for Master. And then when Master finished, I'm sure he did it just to bless Swamiji, but it was as if he wanted help rising from his chair. So he held out his hands, and Swami went and helped lift him up. And he looked deeply into Swamiji's eyes, and he said, just a bulge of the ocean. And so the really great ones, see, he used the image that a wave has three parts. It has that part that's connected to the ocean, and that is, as he termed it, just a bulge of the ocean. And then it has the momentum. A wave has some sort of energy that pushes it away from the connection with the ocean, and that energy pushing it up represents in our lives the Rajasic Guna, that which activates and pushes us away from our unity. And then at the very top, there is the crest of the wave, and that seems like it should be the highest, but it's the most insubstantial. Few little droplets mixed with a lot of air. And those who think of themselves as being big are a few little droplets mixed with a lot of air. But they're the farthest away from the ocean. And so for us to be really something of help, we need to disappear. We need once again not to be the wave, but to be the ocean. And that is the symbol that Master used again and again of how to lead this life. But again, I want to return to this thought of, because the beautiful ceremony of lights, the Diwali, is such a beautiful time of year. And that sense of light coming to us after a period of darkness where the light has been away. And so we've hungered for that light. And then that light returns to us. And that is a cause for celebration in our lives. So this beautiful time of year is in recognition of that. And just as it should be, because when God comes into our life, that's, one could say, the most important part of our whole life, however he comes. Could come as a guru, could come as experience, could come even as a test or as a challenge. But our job is to welcome that. You know, when I was meditating here, I was meditating on the image of Master coming to visit us. If we knew that Master we were sitting here meditating, and someone said, "Oh, Master is there at the end of the street, he's coming," how many of us would stay in our seats? We would immediately get up and run out to greet him. And that's what the devotee does. So when that light, when God begins to come to us, our part is not to sit there passively, proudly on our throne, waiting for him to come, waiting for Divine Mother to come. Our job is to run out with all our devotion, all of our vigor, and throw ourselves at the feet of the Guru. There's that beautiful poem, or story of Tagore's, where there's a beggar, and he hears that the Raja, the king, is coming. And he thinks, oh, now is my chance. Now I'll go out and I'll beg from the king, and he will make me rich. And so he goes out and he begs as the king comes. He holds out his hand, and the king, instead of giving him anything, says, "What have you to give me?" And the beggar thinks, "What madness is this? Here the king, he's rich, and I'm poor, and he's begging of me." And so he looks in his pocket and he finds a single grain of rice and gives that to the king. And then at home that night, he finds a single golden grain of rice. And he thinks, oh, if only I had given him everything, it would have all been turned to gold. And that's the beautiful image of the divine play. We seem to be begging. We seem to be saying, oh, you've been away for so long. Come back to me, come back to me. Bring your light to me, bring your light to me. And that, of course, is part of the divine play. Of course, because we feel that we're bereft of light. Why do we feel that we're bereft of light? The same reason that the earth feels bereft of light every night, not because it's bereft of light, but because it's turned its back on the light. And in turning its back on the light, night comes and darkness falls. And then we can't see and we stumble in that darkness. We saw, some years ago, we went to one of the great art museums in the world, which is the Uffizi in Florence, Italy. And we had a wonderful guide with us. And she said, this is too big of a museum. And if I take you and show you painting after painting after painting, it will simply overwhelm you. I call it getting museum brain. It's like a migraine headache on the worst. You go around after a little bit of time, you can't absorb anymore. So she said, I'm only going to take you to a very few paintings, but each of them will be a very important one, and then I'll explain it to you. And one of the paintings, we would obviously have just walked by without ever giving it a second look, because it wasn't in color. It was just in sepia tones. And it was fairly large, but not terribly large. But it was by Leonardo da Vinci. And it was called The Madonna and the Child. The Madonna and Child. And the beauty of it was Da Vinci was a genius, absolute genius. And what he did in part in his art was to show psychological traits. So it wasn't just a portrait of a person. He was able to capture the consciousness of that person. And so this wonderful woman, Beatrice was her name, she said, I want you to look at this painting look at it, and then tell me if you see anything strange about it. And of course, we all have ideas of what was strange about it. Well, there's no color. And the edges are only partly finished, and we have all these things. She said, no, none of that. Look now at the source of the light. And when we did that, we could see that all the light was coming from the Madonna and the child in the center of the painting. So normally in the painting you have a light source, and all the shadows are cast by that light source, aren't they? But in this painting, that Madonna and child, all of the shadows were cast from that light, so they went out in different ways. But the real genius of it was that there were maybe 10 or 12 figures in it, plus the Madonna. And every one of those had a relationship to the light. And there was one man, an older man, and he was kneeling at the feet of the Madonna and child, and just looking at that with such devotion and adoration. And because of that, the light was filling all the features of his face. And then there was another youth who was like this. And so the light filled part of his face, but the rest was in shadow, showing arrogance, the arrogance of youth that wasn't ready to. And then there was, I don't know whether it was a merchant, whatever it was, but someone with his bag. And he was an old man, kind of a craggy face, and bitter and angry. And he was turned completely away from the light, and his face was all in darkness. And it was a beautiful, beautiful expression of when we face the light, when we face God, when we throw ourselves at the feet of God. You know, Devi and I often at Ananda village, but also elsewhere, we'll lead a fire ceremony where we will offer ghee or we will offer rice into the fire. And the rice represents, well, the ghee represents our devotion. And the rice represents the seeds of past karma. And because we have done this so many times, I've learned that if you want to get all the rice into the fire, meaning that you want to give all your karma into the light of God and have it burned up, you want to get very close to that fire. The farther you are away, the more it scatters, and some grains of rice fall elsewhere. And so that's a very good image that if we have seeds of karma, and we want those to be burnt up and purified, then get as close to the source of light as you can. Now those seeds of karma actually represent seeds in the spine. That's where the memories of past lives, the karma of past actions and events, that's where they reside. And so the seeds of karma reside in the spine. And what we need to do in order to become purified is we need to offer those into the light. Now for us, we've been given techniques that help us do that. That's what Kriya does. It awakens the energy, the flow of energy in the spine, and that brings those seeds of karma up. But here again, the image of being as close to the light as possible. That means deep concentration at the kutastham, spiritual eye. The more we can try to feel that we're merging into that. The offering is not just those seeds of karma, it's our hearts especially. That beautiful chant of Masters, in secret in my soul, I will gather blossoms for you. Dipping them in devotion, I will lay them at thy feet. Well, these beautiful blossoms have been offered, perhaps not quite in secret, but anonymously, which is in and of itself beautiful. But they've been dipped in devotion. But the flowers that we decorate with represent the flowers of devotion. that reside deep in our own hearts. And when we decorate the image of God, this is the seat of the Holy Thing. When we decorate the image of God, the murti of the spiritual life, with the petals of our devotion, offering up everything, then God receives that. And when we give Him everything, unlike the beggar with the grudge, then He gives us everything back in return. And that's the eternal glory of the spiritual life.
Good evening, everyone. I too want to wish you all a happy Diwali, and also to thank you all for coming this evening, joining us. And also to thank you. We've had such beautiful contacts with so many of you during our stay in Pune, and you have welcomed us with such open-hearted divine love and friendship, and we've had just many beautiful moments with many of you here. And I remember last year when we were in Chennai, there was an older man who was a part of the work there, part of the central member, and we knew a little bit about his life. And he'd had a very hard life, and not a lot of happiness in that life. And we were having a satsang like this, and afterwards he came up to me and he said something that I have treasured. He just took my hand and he said, "I will cherish the memories of these times." And it meant so much to me because I knew he didn't have a lot of memories to cherish in his life. And so when we're together with our Guru Bhais in divine love and friendship, whatever is said, it really, the words aren't that important, the activities aren't that important, but the precious moments of divine friendship between Guru Bhais, those are moments to cherish. And we want you to know that we do cherish them. Each encounter is precious and special. We all also should say, if any of you are watching us not in India, we are not under terrorist attack here. All the explosions that you hear, it's just crackers that are going off. We're quite safe. We don't have to send in a rescue squad. God is so kind and so wise. And when you look at the world around us, this material world, you see that everything is in a cycle. Nothing is an abrupt beginning, abrupt end. But there's day followed by night, spring followed by summer, and the seasons pass. And then in the larger cycle of things, the great 24,000-year cycle of the yugas, one great age of man follows another age of man. And if we only had that to think about, that in itself is a lesson, because nothing ends. God is eternally renewing each day, renewing each season, renewing each cycle, each one of us. And for me, as I think about the deeper meaning of Diwali, of course, outwardly we're celebrating the return of Lord Rama and Sita to their kingdom. But what does that mean on a deeper level? The Rama represents the Lord, Dharma, righteousness, the divine consciousness, returning after a great battle to his kingdom. And really this is symbolic of each of us. We are born in the image of God, but then there is a battle. Darkness challenges us. And Lord Rama has to go and fight the battle, and we are left to to fend for ourselves. What does that mean? The soul nature is always there, but we forget. The Lord seems to be obscure because we get caught up in egoic activities, in working on our karma. But then, through the grace of God, the Lord returns to our soul nature. And Master says that yoga, union with God, we don't have to discover something anew. It's simply smriti, it's memory, it's the return, just like these cycles of time, it's the return of the divine consciousness, the light, the presence of the Guru, however you describe it. But it's that renewal, that return once more. And one of, I think, the things that I value greatly, I won't say the most, but greatly in Master's teachings, is this sense of renewal and of hope. Because so much of his teachings are about making the effort. He said a saint is a sinner who never gave up. Sri Yukteswar said, the lives of all men, the past lives of all men, are dark with many stains. All things in future will improve if we are making the right spiritual effort now. So in the interim, where Lord Rama has not yet returned to the kingdom, and that means in this interim of our lives, before we realize that God was always with us, we wander lost in this world, and we make mistakes, and we stub our toes on the rocks of bad karma. But we need to remember that this is just for a brief period of time. And whatever we need to go through, we just say, Lord, I know you will return, and I will keep walking forward. And God does not judge us. A dear friend of ours said to us recently, shortly after she had met Swami Kriyananda, and I guess she had a sense of guilt for some mistakes. And she said to Swamiji, thank you for forgiving me. And he said, no, I don't put it that way. You should say, thank you for accepting me. And there's such a difference in that. Forgive me, if you think, oh Lord, forgive me, you're starting from a point of denying the light within you. But if you simply say, Lord, accept me, with all that I am, then of course the Lord will accept us, because we are His children. We are Divine Mother's children. There's nothing we can do, that will make Divine Mother reject us or need to forgive us, but only accept us. And so I think in this time of Diwali, it's important to renew. Just as we renew our spiritual aspiration, whatever it is the past year has been, just let that go. Ananda, my mom, gave a beautiful illustration. She said, when a person on the beach has a little canoe and they're trying to go out to sea, first they push their little canoe out, but the currents are such that they can't get into the current to go out to sea. And they walk down the beach a little bit and still they can't. Finally, they find that point where the current is just right and their little boat goes out to sea. Well, really what this is, a symbolic way of explaining, but we try to leave behind a materialistic life. We try to find the current that will take us to God. And we try here, and the forces of our karma drive us back. We try there, no, not yet. But finally we find that place, and we can get our little ship going, our little boat going out to sea, the ocean of God's consciousness. And so, in this time of Diwali, it's a time of special blessings, where if we make a commitment now, we will have that current carrying us forward. If we just see it as outward things, that's fun and that's nice and of course enjoyable. But really, as devotees, we should take it to a deeper level and really say, yes, I will see this as a time of renewal. I will start again. I'm not very good at computers, but I'm just learning about the refresh button. We hit refresh. This is refresh. Do over. Forget the mistakes. Just refresh yourself in God's light. And just take a vow, just as each day is a new beginning, really each breath is a new beginning. Each kriya, for those of you who are kriya bonds, each kriya is a new beginning. And so let us really, with great hope, and forget the past. This is the beginning of a new cycle. And God's grace is with us. We just have to not be waiting with a sense of inadequacy and littleness for Him to forgive our mistakes. But just to say, Lord, here I am now. And accept me. And let us begin anew to walk this path in the light with your love, with your grace.